Anything you want to describe about the design of the tools to maintain safety?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's just talk about a little bit of the innovation. You're exactly right. So previously, when we first started doing this procedure, not only were we doing multiple incisions, but we were trying to get an epidurogram set up. And the epidurogram was supposed to be your line of safety, right? So you know where the epidural space was, you could work your instruments right up against that. And then on top of that, we're using the epidurogram as a way to kind of push a little bit more contrast after we decompressed the ligament to see if we got better spread. If we did, then, we're done. We decompressed it. But think about this. When you go to do an epidural at a level that's got, moderate to moderate severe stenosis, the epidural space doesn't really exist, right? That ligament's pushing right up against the dura, and the chances are that once you get your loss of resistance, you're going to be probably intrathecal. So a lot of the complications that they had that were reported, it was, no different than an epidural steroid injection, which is gives a lot of us pain docs relief to know that, this is a very safe procedure, because when you first get trained on it, you think, man, this is a lot more invasive. This doesn't look as safe as a epidural steroid injection. But after you do these cases, you realize that there's really no difference. And chances are, where that came in is we were trying to do epidurograms at a very tight level in the spinal canal. So it's only inherent that you get that, I think we all know that if somebody's got tight, canal stenosis at 4 or 5 and you want to do an interlaminar epidural, you go the level below, or you do a different approach like transforaminals to kind of help that patient out so you don't end up intrathecal. So one of the evolutions that's happened is we went away from the epidurogram. And part of that, what we realized is that there's a ventral interlaminar line when you get your CLO view or cross-lateral oblique view, which is typically about 45 degrees. So if I'm treating the right side of the patient, I'll rainbow the C-arm over 45 degrees to the left. And that kind of shows me that shingling of the lamina to kind of get in that space. And just ventral to that, the tips of the lamina, you can see a clear line. And I'm sure, you do enough cases or, in epidurals and you use that CLO view, it's easy to see that ventral interlaminar line. So now instead of getting an epidurogram, we can see that line visually. We know where our instruments can work up to. And also with that 45-degree view, that still gives us several millimeters of safety. So what's interesting, a lot of physicians, if you kind of go just even a little past it, they'll kind of freak out and cadaver labs or cases that I've been involved in. And I'm like, look, does that make you feel uncomfortable? They're like, absolutely. I'm like, well, let's go to a true lateral and see what it looks like. And we'll go to a true lateral and they'll still have like 3 or 4 millimeters until they, look like they're going to be in the epidural space. So at that point, it kind of helps them relax. So you do have a lot of safety. Plus that ligament is pushing in. So you probably even got more than just than what it looks like, especially when you go to that true lateral. So that's part of the innovation that's taken place is, no longer having to do an epidurogram, which has led to less complications, which is less OR times, less radiation. But the question is then how do you determine when you're done? Because you used to use that epidurogram to kind of refresh to see that you created more space. And a lot of times you probably falsely make it look good, right? You'd push extra contrast in to be like, oh, now look, you probably cause like a dissection of the epidural space by volume. But now, we kind of figured out that after you get access, to that space, you want to do 3 to 5 meaningful bites. So let's say your rongeur, which is very safe. If you look at it, it's got a curved back end to it. So it's not going to puncture or push through the ligament. It's actually curved to make sure that it doesn't penetrate the ligament. But you use that and on the under surface of the superior lamina, you'll take, 3 to 5 bites, working in a medial to lateral fashion, kind of removing bites and ligament. And then you can turn that instrument upside down. And now that curve, prevents you from getting any harm. But you can actually do kind of more of an over the top technique on the inferior lamina, where you can actually kind of wrap over the top, take bites of bone. You're actually basically taking that ligament now, and it's kind of like your drapes in your house, right? It's connected to the ceiling or the roof, but nothing's connected to the floor. So now you're going to kind of work in take 3 to 5 bites, medial to lateral, kind of disarticulating that ligament off the superior surface of the inferior lamina. And then once you kind of feel like that instrument, you're getting diminished returns or just feels like you got enough tissue out, then at that point you'll transition to your tissue sculpture. The tissue sculpture is also blunted, but it does have a sharper top just to kind of get into the ligament. So you do have to be careful that's the only instrument that cannot be turned upside down. So you have to always use that upright. What it's meant to do, and we show this in labs all the time, is that it'll kind of pierce the ligament it won't go through the ligament. And then you're shaving that dorsal aspect. And so you'll kind of do that same thing again, 3 to 5 sweeps, medial to lateral. And then at that point, if the instrument just seems to fall into place or you're getting diminished returns, you're done treating that level and you move on. And it's really easy to tell because a lot of times, and it sounds like you've experienced this, you'll start out and it's like, man, I'm having a hard time getting in between these lamina. And then by the end, you're like, oh, my instrument's dropping right in, getting good bites. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, there's not much coming out. I think I'm done. Let's move on to the next segment.
Yeah. Great point. You mentioned diminished returns. I think love to hear your expertise a little bit more on that. Some people would just say by the IFU, right? You take 3 bites, you move on. But, a similar story we could kind of look at, the Inari system, which was also, acquired by Stryker, basically blew up, right? Grew in incredible volume because people started showing what they were accomplishing. And, some people would say, you take 2 passes. Others would say, you go till you get diminished returns. And that's when you've accomplished what you need. Any thoughts on when it's appropriate to stop? Do you just stop at 3 or do you keep going till you've accomplished what you think?
Yeah, I mean, usually in my head, since I've already measured the ligament, right, I got it. And so I can say, well, God, this one seemed to be, 5 millimeters. That other level was only like 3.5. So I may concentrate and take a little bit more bites, on the level that was thicker, just to make sure that that patient's going to get a better result. And so take a little bit more time there, or just do the traditional 3 to 5 on the other level that wasn't as thick. But I also like the scrub tech that's scrubbed in with me to kind of on the blue towel, kind of put the pieces I'm taking out and kind of lay them out. And, usually, with the Verto stays, they'd always say, oh, you want about a pea-size for each level you're doing, or that quarter of that, or that, that half side, you want about pea-size. And so I like to kind of put the tissue or the ligament that I'm taking out, put them there and just kind of see what it looks like. And obviously, if a level was thicker, I want to see a little bit more of the ligament from those levels taken out than the others. What I find is that you can really feel that when that instrument just clunks into place, you've done your job. You've done it. I look over the table, I see, there's plenty of ligament there, and I'm like, yeah, let's move on. Let's go to another segment.
And, I think one of the things that's interesting that people are talking about more and more now, right, is the auger and the rongeur is actually important too,
yes.
In the decompression.
Yeah, I think that auger, since it's creating a channel, it's opening that tight shingling. And I think you're exactly right. I think how do they do laminotomies in traditional spine surgery? It's more open, but they take that Kirsten, which is exactly what our rongeur is, and that's how they do it. They don't have a tissue sculpture when they do laminotomies to give patients relief in traditional spine surgery. So I do know a lot of physicians that will use that decompress, and they feel like that's good enough, and they don't even use the tissue sculpture. I can tell you, a couple of them told me they take that tissue sculpture and throw it right in the garbage at the beginning of the case. I don't do that. I feel like all the studies were done doing, using the rongeur and the tissue sculpture. So I don't think they have any data to support that, but they say they get great results. And I think you're exactly right. Even now with the auger, they're like, all I need is the auger. All I need is the rongeur. I don't need that tissue sculpture to get a good result for my patients.
Yeah. I think to your point, I guess what I was trying to say is I think all 3 actually contribute. And yeah, it's easier than it used to be.